Here we go again. Again, my name is Philip Hutchinson. I am very glad, honored, and it's a privilege to be here. Like I said, this is a testimony or a story or something that, of course, leads to where I am today and what I am today, which is definitely a changed man. Before I do start, I want to read this. It's very short, but I think it's very appropriate for tonight in this month because we just lost February 21st. I think one of the best, greatest, beautiful preachers, ministers, pastors, you may call it whatever you are, whatever you want. But Billy Graham was an institution. He was a blessing to all of us. Yeah. And now he's rewarded and he's with the Lord, and millions of people that left before him are welcoming him. That's right. Up there. Amen. So I just want to read this because it's, like I said, I think is very good before I start. More than 10,000 evangelists, Christian leaders, sat in a giant auditorium in Amsterdam in 1986, listening to the world-renowned evangelist Billy Graham. As he narrated some of his experiences, he said, "Let me tell you, every time I stand before the congregation of God's people to preach, I tremble and my knees wobble. What? I wonder, how can such a great preacher who has enthralled millions with his powerful sermons exhibit trembling and wobbling knees?" Then he went on to describe not fear and stage fright, but intense humility and meekness as he felt inadequate for the daunting task to which God had called him. He relied on God for strength, not on his own eloquence. Moses felt inadequate when God sent him to deliver the enslaved Israelites from their 400-year captivity in Egypt. Moses pleaded with the Lord to send someone else with the excuse that he had never been a good speaker. See Exodus 4:10-13. We may have similar fears when God calls us to do something for him. But his encouragement to Moses can also spur us on. Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. As Billy Graham said that day, when God calls, you do not be afraid of trembling and wobbling knees, for he will be with you. Amen. And that I've experienced because I've spoken before, not my testimony, but as a professor in Tres Dias, which are several retreats, men retreats, that I've been to, and I've been a professor several times. And like today, I have made notes. I have made a really outline for my talk. And it doesn't matter what you write on this paper. It doesn't matter what you fix. It doesn't matter what you prepare. The Holy Spirit will change it. And sometimes what you've got here is nothing. It's what it comes out. So that's my experience. Now, let's get to business. First of all, my name is Philip Hutchinson. It's an English name. I was born in Puerto Rico. I came from Spanish and English inheritance. My maternal grandfather was Spanish. He came from Mallorca, Spain. My British grandfather came from Bristol, England. And they both met in Puerto Rico. Met because my Spanish grandfather had all his children born in Puerto Rico. And my British grandfather had one born in Barbados, one in Dominican Republic, and then 3 in Puerto Rico. And my father was one of the ones that was born in Puerto Rico. They were all bilingual in my grandfather's house because everybody spoke Spanish out of the street, and every day in his house we had to speak English. So as a little boy, when I visited and stayed there, which was a lot of times, I had to speak English from the very start. But Puerto Rico has been a bilingual country for years. I had a Christian upbringing, and I say Christian, more so religious, because I went to parochial school, Catholic school, from day one, from first grade until I graduated from high school. The reason that I say this is because that did not influence me to continue to follow in the Catholic religion or as a Christian, as you will see as I continue. Why I say that is because my mother and father, they were young at the time, of course, and when I got to school age, or even before, they were both working, so they left me with my grandparents, okay? My grandparents, the British side, were not Catholics, but because they lived a block away from a parochial school and a Catholic church, St. George Parish, they converted to Catholicism. And my aunts, and and my mother's side, of course, they were Catholics also. But my mother and father did not go to church. I didn't have that example growing up. But I was baptized as a Catholic, I had no choice. You're born in 3 or 4 months, you get baptized, whether you like it or not, okay? And that was the way. And Puerto Rico, 90% of those days, was a Catholic island, most of the people. So I grew under the influence of religion, like I said, through high school. But I didn't have the example of my father and mother going to church. They worked, and Sundays they were too tired, or they didn't go to church. So I went to church when I was in school, because in school, being a Catholic school, every Friday we have to, after I made my first communion, you have to go to confession, so you could have communion on Sundays, so forth and so on. Anyway, my father and mother were not getting along. So the relationship was not going well. And after the war, in 1946, my mother and I went to New York. We went to live with my maternal grandfather's sister in New York, who had 4 boys that were in the service. 3 of them went overseas. 1 was left behind because of the Solomon Brothers law. They could not all 4 go overseas, but one stayed. But anyway, to make a long story short, we went to live in New York. The problem was that my father followed us, okay? That was not good. I never experienced any bad relationships, any problems as a child, except when I was in New York, when my father followed us over there. So, again, that was not good. So after 2 years in New York, my mother and I came back to Puerto Rico. Of course, she got a divorce, they were divorced. And we came to live with my maternal grandfather, which was like a father to me. And he was my father, because my father stayed in New York, he didn't come back. I didn't see my father for 8 years. So my father had a business, which in the summer I used to go and I just thinking that I was doing something or working, but I wasn't. But I had a lot of fun. He also was he had lost his wife, my grandmother, when I was 3 years old. So Sundays, we did go to church, okay, when we came back from New York to live with him. We did go to church. And this was their routine on Sundays. Sunday morning, we went to church. Then we went to lunch. Then we went to the cemetery to visit my grandmother's grave. And then we went to the racetrack. Every Sunday. I love that because my grandfather loved horses. He was a very, as a matter of fact, my wife's from Kentucky, and I hadn't met my wife then, but he always told people, I'm from Kentucky. And he had a really, really heavy accent, English accent. So, but it was funny because he did love horses. You know. So that was, I'm just giving you a background of my early years as far as my Christian upbringing, which was not. My experience in the Catholic school, education-wise, excellent. And that's why I went, because my mother was very determined that I was going to have a good education. And public schools in Puerto Rico in those days they were not that good. So, but Catholic schools with Catholic nuns, you couldn't have a better education. So that's where I was going, and that's where I went. But when I got to high school, you know, you get certain ideas and certain things that you see, and you start questioning. So I was getting away from God. And when I graduated, and I decided that, you know, this was problematic, but you'll see what happens. After graduation, I informed my mother I had already done all this studying on all the research because I wanted to fly. I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to have an aviation career. That was a very tough pill for my mother to swallow because I was very young, and in her mind, I was going to get killed. There was no question about it. Flying was not that pioneering, you know, in the 40s, 50s. Now we were talking 57, 58. But she was determined, no, you're not going to fly. So what do? You start making promises, okay? And my mother was one that, she was very instrumental in my life. Very good example. My mother was straight as an arrow. You couldn't lie to my mother because she knew if I was lying, and I'll tell you, if I was lying, she would know it. And we became very, very close. So guess how I got my aviation career? She said, okay, you want to be a pilot? Finally, you know, I had other people that I knew that were in the profession, that were friends of hers, and she had good relationships with other people that worked with the airlines. So I managed to have some people not really convince her, but to allow me to pursue my career with one condition. This is how my mother was. I mean, she was one condition. She said, you're going to have to write me every single day.
Oh, wow.
I have to get, I don't care what it says. I don't care if it says, I love you, Mom. I'm okay. Anything. But I have to have a postage stamped letter from you every single day. I have those letters.
Oh,
That's when yes, I do.
Wow.
I do.
What a treasure.
So that was Mom. But anyway, I did. Like I said here, aviation career, tough pill to swallow for mother. Very opposed to it, made restrictions and promises to let me go. Then the promises, like I explained, that was the biggest. When I graduated and came back, I was still very young, of course, and it was September, I remember. And of course, we had a local airline in Puerto Rico, which I was looking forward to being hired at. How, you know, and I had my dreams, but I sent my resumes to all the major airlines in the United States. I did to the local airline. And I did to some international airlines too, which were not in the United States. Well, 2 airlines immediately responded and sent me tickets. One was in Dominican Republic, and the other one was in Honduras, okay? So that was the other. How do we jump that? This. My mother said, "No way. Oh no. I'll never see you again. You'll die in one of those countries. I'll never see you. That's not, you know." So again, we go, and she said, "Wait till Christmas. Wait till after Christmas, and then if nobody else has called you, if no U.S. airlines call you, if not the local airlines call, you can go with those other airlines." So how could I say no? So I said, "Okay, I'll wait till Christmas." November 16, I got a hiring date from my local airline. Now, at this stage and this time in my life, I had no idea. I thought, I'm good looking, I've got a good resume, I did good in the interview, that's why I'm hired. Till many, many years later. But anyway, I did get hired, okay? So I get hired by the local airline, first airline job, wow. I get married, have children, growing professionally, job became first priority. That was my life, my job. And I have to say, I was doing a good job because I started climbing. I became an instructor, I became a check airman, I was moving up in the world, neglecting my family, wrong values, wrong goals, and I put my job ahead of everything. That was it in my life. I was in the world. I was totally into the world. I was doing so well, and I was, that was it. So it gets better. It doesn't get worse. It gets better because the local airline which I work for gets acquired now by a major U.S. carrier. Okay, they buy my little good old airline in Puerto Rico, and we come to the United States to fly for one of the biggest, at one time, the largest airline in the United States. Anyway, the merger acquisition with a major U.S. carrier, now things are really happening. New environment, more opportunities, more money, and more opportunities